For our last presentation, but certainly not least, we'll actually hear about the development of VR software from students. So to discuss their work, Marie Graham and Sydney Smith from the Mount Vernon School and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
Oh, absolutely. Love it.
So, hi everyone. My name is Sydney. I'm a 10th grade student at the Mount Vernon School in Atlanta. So, I'm sure all of you are wondering what's going on. We'll find out. But basically, Mount Vernon is a school of inquiry-based learning, impacting, and basically we do more real-world learning. So our project with the VR team will introduce a bit more, but VR team is just one of the many activities we do. We also have worked, some of the students will work with outside companies such as Chick-fil-A and Mercedes to design programs to help them out. Yeah, so you want to add anything?
We also, as an independent school, we have about 1,200 students in Atlanta, Georgia, and we start design really early. So we have kids in kindergarten who are actually designing their new playground. And what we do, because we start them so early, we kind of get out of their way. I mean, I feel like as a teacher, my job is a talent scout to try to find talent in students and also to get out of their way so they can do the great work that they can do. Kids don't have to wait until they're out of school to do impactful work, and because that impactful work motivates them. I am Marie Graham. I began the VR lab with a group of amazing students in 2018. I also used to be a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife. I delivered 1,000 babies a long time ago. I don't know if I could still do it unless they come out the same way, and then I probably could figure it out. Yeah, so you want to go to the next slide? Can you go? Yeah. One of the things we always talk about, well, the first thing I want to say is that as a high school teacher, people often will say to me, oh, you're taking one for the team. No, this new generation is amazing. They're more inclusive, they're kinder, and they are solution seekers, and they think creatively, which is kind of the tenets of our school. When we worry about technology, and we do worry, I have the mother of 3 teenagers, one of whom has an eating disorder. You see body dysmorphia with all the social media of telling them what they should look like, what they should be like. As a teacher, there's so much distraction. If you go to a table full of teenagers, often and adults, you'll see everybody on their phone. How do we harness technology for good? Technology is not going away, but what do we do to go to make it a more positive experience? And I love this. Technology is neither good nor bad. It's what you do with it that makes the difference. What can we do to make positive impact with technology? One of the huge things that we're talking about in medicine, right? I mean, not in medicine, in education, is really is AI. I mean, we're looking at ChatGPT, and a kid can generate an essay in like 2 minutes. And I tried it, and for the teens here in the VR team right there, like, don't hear me right now. But it's not bad. So none of this is going away. I mean, think about the 1970s when we were worried about handheld calculators. There was a huge number of people who were upset about also the horseless carriage. So the bottom line is we're moving forward. How do we do this in a positive way?
I mean, innovation is always scary when you think about it, because nobody's tried it. I mean, think about people who tried to, come up with new foods. They had to try around with weird things.
And you're like, who tried that first? And so the way this started was I was teaching about refugees. It was during the Syrian crisis with all the refugees, and I was talking to a group of middle schoolers, and I was trying to really involve them and generate empathy, and I'd find them saying things like, Miss Graham, what time's lunch? And I was like, oh, I couldn't get it. And the next day that I introduced that, New York Times had sent all those Google Cardboards to all the educators. And I spent like all night, and I have no technical skills. It took me forever, and I like had pieces left over, but I went in the next day, and they put in their, their phones, and I saw a difference. It was a moment that really changed kind of my path in general. I've nurse practitioner and a teacher, but I had never really, I love technology, but I'd never really understood how it could impact education in this way. The kids became more empathetic. Their language changed. And there's so much power in that. And I saw that, and then that was the moment where I was like, what can we do with this?
Right.
Well, basically, if you're with students, you want students to be able to not just consume, we want them to create. And so basically, we work very hard to try to have students actually creating and doing things and storytelling around this.
And I mean, going along with that, being able to consume as well as produce, we're coming up with, for example, our VR team. Instead of, you know, just sitting around playing games being like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, we're like, how can we bring this to other people? How can we share this experience? Because we know that we've had a lot of fun, you know, playing around, but not everyone has access to that, and we want to be able to make that more accessible and make sure that everyone kind of has this experience. It's about sharing technology rather than keeping it to yourself.
I also wanted to give a shout out because this really is about the students. Also, when we started this VR team and this VR lab, I didn't have technical skills, and I still don't. And by the way, I tried to learn to code. I co-direct with Mr. Nikolai Ibanez, who's right there, and he came from SCAD as an intern and knew how to do all the things. So something that would take me like an hour, he could do in like 30 seconds, and I was like, oh my God. And then a lot of things I just didn't know how to do. So I tried to learn to code, and it's just not happening. It's not happening. But he helps teach the students all the technical skills that go along with this type of technology. And then finally, we didn't have any VR equipment, and we didn't have any gaming computers, so we couldn't even run anything if we had it. So I was teaching the kids how to use LinkedIn. I found someone who was with Alienware, was a subsidiary of Dell, and I was like, what if we reached out to the top guy? And we did, and I was friendly, acted like maybe he'd met me somewhere, maybe not. And then he gave me the name of the person under him, and I said, your boss sent me to you, kind of. Yeah. And yes, right, it worked. And then they said, could we write a white paper? It was a week. I'd never written a white paper and was not completely sure what that was. And I said yes, and then the school hated me for a little while because it was just, 24 hours a day writing a white paper. And you can go to the next slide. And then we got the grant. And so I don't know how it happened. I was asking for like one gaming computer, and they asked if 10 would work. And I was on a call. I didn't even speak. My boss said she's nodding. She's definitely nodding. And next thing you know, we have equipment just arriving all over the place. We had gaming computers, we had desktops, we had laptops, we had, all of these different headsets. And then my boss said, do you know how to do this? And I was like, well, I'm going to learn. And that's what we've done. And this is Justin Blumenkrantz. I just want to mention him because this project got him into Stanford, and he's studying this now. This is what he wants to do. And then he's actually meeting with a friend of mine, Thornton Muir and Leslie Muir. He's a business leader who, after experiencing this, gave us our first 3D cameras. So.
All right, so what do we use this VR lab for? So a lot of things we've been doing is being able to learn with VR. I mean, obviously we hear gaming in VR and doing all these other opportunities, and obviously we've heard tons of talks. That's what this conference is about, technology. But basically what we've done is we've involved learning. We've been able to, for kindergartners, we had them come to the VR lab and we showed them around space. They got to ride a rocket ship and go around the planets they were learning about. They got to learn about Mars, and then one kid, even, he was so immersed in it, he was sitting in a chair and they were going near the sun, and he goes, if I touch it, am I gonna burn? I mean, that's a sign that we're doing what we want to do. We're getting that immersive reality where everyone's kind of being able to experience this firsthand and kind of see the sun up close and not, hey, here's the sun, look at it, cool, right? They're actually able to reach out, touch it, and kind of learn more about it. We've also, in one of my classes, we learned about anatomy, and we got to explore the human body and look at, I think it was ShareCare VR actually that we looked at, and we got to experience it. We got to go through the different parts of the body, see how diseases affected it, the rapidness, the stages, and we got to be able to experience that rather than just seeing diagrams. We got to move the models around. We got to experience all of that, and I think that's something that's really important to Mount Vernon. It's special, is that we kind of have had this opportunity to learn firsthand rather than just seeing all these random diagrams and being like, okay, cool. So.
We're even using it in mathematics, mathematics being, so abstract. It's incredible if someone is in something like trigonometry where numbers change and the shapes and dynamics, and that people are able to experience that firsthand. So we've used it in classes like that as well.
All right, so one really cool thing that I really appreciated doing, so we got to bring our VR to, assisted living facilities. We got to bring, so we brought mainly Google Earth. We had another experience where they could go swimming with dolphins, and we just got to experience some really cool things. Of course, you know, a lot of people are hesitant to try new technology, and everyone was a little nervous. They're like, is it gonna kill me? And I was like, no, we're just gonna explore little fun places around the world. And we got to take them on tours, and some of them haven't even been out of these facilities in years, and being able to experience these places all around the world, from like experiencing Venice to experiencing Paris and Las Vegas, all these cool places that they wanted to visit. And in fact, we had someone who was a veteran from Korea, and he wanted to go back there and kind of like experience the nicer parts of Korea and kind of be able to see that so that he could get that experience. And then we had another nice lady who decided she wanted to swim with the dolphins. So she did that experience about 5 or 6 times.
Well, she'd been actually paralyzed.
Yeah.
And so that was her dream, and she had never gotten to do it. And so she did it, and then we looked and she was back, and then we looked and she was back, and about the 5th time we were like, okay, so we need to get them a headset, is what we need to do.
Yeah. All right, so 3D modeling. Most of our, if not all, of our modeling coding is run by our students. We have Madison over there. Say hi.
She's attending SCAD next year, actually, to study this.
So she has been doing a ton of our 3D modeling. So for Christmas, we designed a little game called Ginger Bowling, where we got to have, you could throw a little, it was an ornament? Yeah, you got to throw an ornament and you would knock down the pins. And it was just kind of this fun little experience that we got to try out coding with. She's been working really hard on our island especially, which we'll get to. And she's been able to model this. It's been student run. We've also had student coders who've been working with C# coding specifically. And a lot of this is just student run, which I think is something that's really special to this project is, you know, being students, we're not even in college yet, and we're trying all these fun things, and I feel like it can really take us on a path that we'll have to be exciting in the future.
And you'll find Madison like working, I mean, you would just go past and she's just working so diligently on every object, every terrain, everything that's in what we're going to talk to you about is created, a lot of it was created by Madison. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, otherwise affectionately known in Atlanta as CHOA, one of the largest pediatric hospitals in the Southeast. When I started talking about, okay, so what do we want to design? What change do you want to make? A lot of kids had some experience with rehab. In fact, one of our faculty members had a brother who had a catastrophic football injury and was paralyzed and went through a lot of rehab. And we spoke to him a couple of times and were able to really get good information from that. But rehab was what we decided that they were interested in pursuing. And because I used to be a nurse practitioner, I had at least some ideas of who we could contact and what we could do to move this forward. We always start with what do we know and what do we not know. So like, what is unique about the pediatric population? What is unique about it in a medical environment? And really, and you can go to the next slide, we really start with questions. So one of the things I do is I say, okay, I need 500 questions. Go. And take sticky notes, and they're everywhere. They're covering every board. And then we organize them. We're like, okay, so we start with like, what even is a pediatric population? Who does rehab? Where is it done? Are there certain things that need to happen? What are things that are unique to the pediatric population? And we spoke to pediatric patients, and the kids were like, but we can't go to the hospital. I'm like, you're at a school. It is the pediatric population. And we interviewed anybody, I mean, poor children, they're walking to lunch and we're like, hey, you know, and asking them questions. And what we did was we took all that data and then we organized it, and then these were the patterns that they found, okay? And all this legwork is done by students. I just stand on the side going, go, go. They love the ocean, games, festivals, and animals. We found that over and over and over again. They love colors, surprises, and music. Again, brain science. This is all of the information that we already know. They feel scared and bored, and sometimes they wish to be somewhere else during procedures. We did get some permission to speak to pediatric patients at CHOA, and they learned a lot about red tape and the privacy that goes around medicine. That was very frustrating. They're like, we tried and tried, keep going, you can get there. And then other things we are associated with distraction. So we're like distraction and pain regulation. You know, they started to understand that the brain can actually only process really one thing at a time. It's really switching back and forth. But these were things that had to do with pain regulation, colors, rhythmic motions, patterns, surprises, agency, being able to choose, and novelty. And then we started thinking like, medicine, you know, especially analgesia with the pediatric population is being used so carefully, and particularly now we talk about that all the time. And these are kind of like originally what could be used. And this is Children's Hospital of LA, actually, which we studied quite a lot because there was a lot done with that. And then we started designing. So they had this idea that it was going to be an island, okay? And half of the island was going to be pain regulation and distraction, okay? So it was like an ocean, and you're a small child. You can walk into the ocean. You can play with beach balls. You can be in a place where you hear rhythmic sounds. There's seagulls. It's just incorporating all that research. And then as an educator, I'm teaching them qualitative and quantitative data. Like, how do you get that? How do you read a research article? How do you know if you should believe what you read? So all that is built into this. And the other side of the island was going to be a beach carnival, because the carnival games could work in the actual rehab. So as we started moving into this, we started talking to physical therapists, occupational therapists. What do we need to do? They would literally come in and be like, we need to do this. And we'd say, you know, skeet ball. Or we would try all of these different movements, but we would incorporate them into games. And we're actually not showing that, so we're good.
All right, so another cool thing, again, working with the physical therapist. So we have something at Mount Vernon known as fail up. So a lot of little errors happened here and there. You know, we had problems with the coding. We had issues with making sure that we had something that could work for multiple areas of physical therapy. We had to make sure that we weren't just, you know, throwing, because sometimes people can't do that, or they needed something where they could move and walk around, and they needed to be able to practice that. We had issues with that. We had, of course, you know, COVID happened as a little bit of a barrier during that time. Trying to create a trial was also difficult, you know, as students, and we're just trying to figure this all out. Most of us don't really have experience in the medical field as of now. You know, we don't even have a degree yet, but we're trying to figure this all out. And it was just trial and error over and over and over again till we could get something that would even work at all.
It was exciting to see the kids in the medical environment. There was so much learning that was organically happening, to watch the patients struggle, to see how the professionals worked with the patients. This was my favorite, maybe one of my favorite moments of teaching ever. I've taught for 15 years, and like this moment where we actually brought the island to the Children's Hospital, and this was actually the first patient. His head, I think, must be on the other side of that. Now that I'm looking at this picture, it looks like he's headless. He's not. He's a 17-year-old young man who'd had a terrible car accident and was really just in some deep depression. They worked with him every day. It's an outpatient facility, and so they work from, I think, 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. all day. They said he'd been there a couple weeks. He had smiled, not at all, just deeply depressed, and they talked him into trying this. Wow, that moment, this exact moment where he tried it, he lifted his head and he began to smile, and the PTs and OTs were like, and our students were like, and I was teared up, and it was just a moment of, see all the work you're doing? This is a different time. Worksheets, sit and get, take a lecture. No, they are in a children's hospital saying, I created something that's making the world, the life easier of this human being. That's everything. That's the work that students should be doing. They should be doing this type of real world work. But this just motivated everybody exponentially.
Going along with that, like, I mean, casually, I'm sure anyone who's gone through med school, you know, it's always, everybody's goal is to get through a test. Everybody's goal is to see, let's get a good grade on this test so we can pass. But here it was more of, where we were kind of down and we needed to see a good result. So this good result was more of a motivation than just a casual grade or seeing something on a paper. This was a real world experience that we could take and learn from, and we were actually interacting with people rather than just having this okay, here's what's gonna happen in the future, not we were able to do something at this age rather than, we say a lot, age doesn't equal capability when coming to all this stuff. Obviously we don't have degrees, as I said, but we can still learn and we can be able to try things, and it's all about failing and trying again.
And it's self-motivation. You don't have to tell kids to do this work. You don't have to say, remember to do your homework. The kids come in wanting to do the work. Some updates?
Yeah, so updates, it works, which is great. It took a little while to get there. So we have a trial of about 10 patients, which is not much as of now, but it's a little tricky. As we've said, you know, trying to get through barriers and being able to respect privacy of everyone, and just doing this as students is a little tricky, but we're getting there. We are also constantly updating this. We've been working on this recently. We've been fixing all of the coding. We've been trying out new models. We've been implementing new programs on the island, new games, new fish. We're probably going to start incorporating some fishing, which will be a new motion to try out, which is really cool. Madison's been modeling some very pretty fish. We've also been trying out, we're going to work on some basketball. We're going to be working on more skee ball. We're working on the physics of that, making sure everything looks right. So it's not, we got to keep it immersive. You know, if a basketball is going flying in the air and just staying there, you're going to be like, that's a little weird. You're kind of going to get a little distracted. But being able to be there instead of being in this random hospital room that you're not as excited about, you're going to be able to feel like you're not where you are, I guess.
I mean, the it works part is that the PTs and OTs are saying they're doing about 2 to 3 times the amount of physical therapy. I mean, that's amazing. And the gathering data is tricky because of HIPAA and understanding the privacy, and that's been frustrating, right? We want to gather data from them, but it can't be anything that is web-based. So that's difficult. You know, that's made it difficult. And then, like Sydney said, we keep circling back over and over and changing things and making things better. It's really never finished. Just what can we do to keep it moving forward?
And we're also working on implementing it into inpatient as well. Currently, it's only in outpatient facilities, so we're trying to get that into inpatient so it's less of, you know, I mean, it's still very awesome to have it in outpatient. However, we'd like to spread it into inpatient.
Yeah,
as well.
they've asked us to. They're ready to launch that. And you can go to the next slide.
And then we just wanted to say thank you, because keep in mind, we're coming from all the way across the country. As a sophomore in high school, this is a little crazy. My mom's in pharmaceuticals, so I would often go to conferences like this with her, and being here, being like my mom, wearing a name tag, going up here, I feel exactly like her. And, you know, we often hear, oh my gosh, I'm becoming like my mother, but I feel exactly like her currently, so.
Finally,
You know.
I will say it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I did want to have the VR team stand up. This is the team that traveled